All right, let's dive right into this explainer and unpack what is, literally, the wildest, most dramatic family tree in all of ancient history. We're talking about the Greek gods and goddesses. But hey, we're not just looking at them as boring marble statues in a museum today. Oh no. We're going to look at them as the messy, ultra-complex, chaotic characters they actually were to the people who worship them.
I mean, seriously, what do a castration, a swallowed rock, and a giant three-headed dog all have in common? Well, to really understand the ancient world, we've got to explore these bizarre events. Because, let's be honest, they read way less like sacred, holy texts and a whole lot more like ancient reality television. These myths are just packed with jealousy, brutal betrayals, and deep vengeance. And the crazy thing? They form the absolute foundation of how the ancient Greeks made sense of their entire universe.
So we're going to make sense of this chaotic cosmos by breaking it down into 5 key eras. 1. The first divine generations. 2. The epic war for Olympus. 3. The elder Olympian siblings. 4. The next generation. And finally, 5. Hades and the Underworld.
Kicking things off with Section 1, the first divine generations, or, as I like to call it, the dawn of cosmic drama.
You know, the blueprint for intergenerational warfare was drawn right here at the start. The violent transfer of cosmic power all began with Gaia, Mother Earth, and Uranus, Father Sky. So Uranus hated some of his monstrous kids and literally hid them away in a deep abyss. Obviously, this completely enraged Gaia, so she convinces her youngest Titan son, Cronus, to ambush his own dad. And he doesn't just ambush him, Cronus literally castrates Uranus with a massive stone sickle and chucks the remains into the ocean, which, fun fact, the Greeks actually believed created the sickle-shaped island of Corfu. Wild, right?
Now, what's really fascinating here is the whole Golden Age concept. It was supposed to be this perfect time with no laws, no rules, no work, but it was secretly ruled by a deeply, deeply paranoid king. Kronos was absolutely terrified of a prophecy saying he'd be overthrown by his own son, you know, exactly like he did to his dad. So his brilliant solution? He just devoured his first 5 children the second they were born. Problem solved, right? Well, not quite. His wife Rhea ends up tricking him. She feeds him a literal rock wrapped up in swaddling blankets. He swallows it whole, which lets her secretly raise her 6th child, Zeus. Which brings us straight into Section 2, the War for Olympus, the ultimate cosmic rebellion.
This is the apocalyptic showdown where Zeus returns, fully grown, to avenge his siblings and claim the cosmos. And he doesn't kick things off with a sword. Nope, he starts with the magic emetic potion given to him by Gaia. He basically forces his dad, Cronus, to literally vomit up the contents of his stomach in reverse order. So out comes the stone first, then his brothers, and finally his sisters. This physically frees Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Hestia, and Demeter so they can join his massive cosmic rebellion.
But the crucial point here is that Zeus didn't fight alone. To win this vast, world-shaking war, known as the Titanomachy, he went down into the abyss and released the Cyclops and the 100-handed Hecaton Trayers. And in return for their freedom, they forged the ultimate weapons of mass destruction, Zeus's iconic thunderbolts, Poseidon's trident, and Hades' helm of darkness. With that kind of firepower, the Olympians won the war and locked the defeated Titans away in the eternal, fiery torture of Tartarus.
So that begs the big question. After conquering the cosmos, who exactly are these victorious Olympians?
Let's find out in Section 3, the elder Olympian siblings, where we'll look at jealousy, vengeance, and nature.
Here's where we see how these ancient stories functioned as the ultimate dysfunctional family drama, while also explaining the terrifying forces of the natural world. I mean, notice just how deeply petty the older siblings could be. Take Hera, the queen of gods. She was so fiercely jealous of Zeus's illegitimate children that she literally sent serpents to kill a newborn Hercules, and later drove him so incredibly mad it caused his famous 12 labors. Or look at Poseidon. When King Minos of Crete kept a magnificent white bull for himself instead of sacrificing it, Poseidon got his revenge by making Minos' wife fall in love with the animal, and that resulted in the terrifying flesh-eating Minotaur. They were constantly using curses and monsters to settle personal grudges with mortals, and honestly with each other.
But, you know, it wasn't all just making monsters. When Hades kidnapped Demeter's daughter, Persephone, the grieving goddess of agriculture totally abandoned her duties. This plunged the entire Earth into a deadly global famine. Because Persephone ate fruit while down in the underworld, she was legally forced to split her year between Hades and her mother. And this is exactly why this matters so much. To the ancient Greeks, Demeter's grief wasn't just some soap opera plotline. It was the literal scientific explanation for why crops die every single winter.
All right, moving on to Section 4, the next generation, featuring the younger gods and illegitimate children.
So Zeus had a massive roster of kids, and they brought entirely different dynamics to Mount Olympus. When we compare these deities side by side, it brilliantly shows how the Greeks categorized different parts of human nature. On one side, you've got Athena, born directly out of Zeus's forehead, by the way, representing noble, strategic warfare and wisdom. She actually won the patronage of Athens by inventing the domesticated olive tree. But on the exact opposite side, you have Ares, the god of sheer bloody brutality. It is super fascinating that the Greeks revered the strategic Athena way more than the savage Ares, who honestly mostly shows up in myths because of his chaotic love affairs.
And speaking of those affairs, Ares famously tangled with Aphrodite, the goddess of love, who happened to be married to Hephaestus, the god of blacksmiths. Now, Hephaestus was lame and had actually been cast right off Mount Olympus by his own mother Hera, but he definitively proved that brains beat brawn. When he caught wind of the affair, he forged this unbreakable chain-linked net, literally trapped Ares and Aphrodite in bed mid-affair and dragged them all the way up to Mount Olympus. Why? Just to publicly humiliate them while the rest of the gods laughed their heads off.
Let's run through a quick roster of the other heavy hitters in this younger generation. You have the twins, Apollo, the god of light and the famous Delphi oracle, who could cure diseases, but, get this, could also cause deadly plagues with his arrows. His sister Artemis was fiercely protective of her chastity and nature. She literally turned a peeping hunter into a deer just so he'd be devoured by his own hunting dogs. Then there's Dionysus, who is worshipped through mass drinking and massive theater festivals. And finally, the winged sandal-wearing trickster Hermes, who acted as the messenger and honestly frequently had to bail Dionysus out of trouble.
Finally, we leave the glittering heights of Olympus and descend into Section 5, Hades and the Underworld, the final destination.
This is the domain of the passive, super strict brother who rarely ever left his subterranean kingdom, Hades. Let's trace the exact procedural journey of a mortal soul down there. Passing into the afterlife completely depended on one thing: whether your living relatives actually remembered to bury you with coins on your eyes. You needed those exact coins to pay Charon, the ferryman, to cross the river Styx. If you were broke, well, you waited on the shores for eternity. If you did cross, you'd have to sneak past Cerberus, the giant three-headed dog, and finally stand trial before the three judges.
And depending on those three judges, your eternal fate was sealed into one of three locations. You either ended up in Elysium, which was basically paradise for heroes and exceptionally good mortals, the neutral Asphodel Meadows for ordinary people who, did nothing really special, or the fiery, terrifying abyss of Tartarus. That place was reserved for the old titans and anyone foolish enough to upset the gods, where they'd be tortured for eternity.
And let me tell you, upsetting the gods was incredibly easy to do, mainly because they were constantly upsetting each other. Remember Hephaestus? When the exiled blacksmith built a magical golden throne that trapped his mother Hera as revenge for rejecting him, all the other gods begged him to let her go. His cold, calculating response? I have no mother. Wow. That heartbreaking and petty quote perfectly encapsulates the endless cycle of hurt, rejection, and revenge that define the entire Greek pantheon.
Which leaves us with one final provocative thought. Why do we relate so much more to a chaotic, deeply flawed family of gods than to beings of absolute flawless perfection? Think about that as you reflect on this explainer. The ancient Greeks didn't invent perfect, morally flawless beings to look up to. They invented a family that was jealous, vengeful, brilliant, and endlessly dramatic. Because perhaps they understood that to truly explain the universe and all its unpredictable forces, you first have to fully embrace the messy, chaotic reality of human nature.